We will be entertaining questions from the audience here as well as via the internet. Let me ask the first question, if I may. The United States and Russia have a broad nuclear security agenda, and that is helping to work with other partners to deal with the North Korean and Iran nuclear threats, to strengthen the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and its worldwide support, to carry out the Proliferation Security Initiative and the U.S.-Russian Global Initiative to combat nuclear terrorism. In this context, is the START Treaty basically irrelevant because Russia is already reducing the size of its strategic nuclear forces, and the United States probably will be interested in that as well as time goes on and defense budgets become tighter? Or, on the other hand, is a future START Treaty, a follow-on START Treaty, is it really going to be an anchor in the U.S.-Russian relationship that will facilitate meaningful cooperation on North Korea, Iran, and other areas?
The START Treaty is not irrelevant, at least from the perspective of the United States administration, and nor is it irrelevant from the point of view of Moscow. Neither side, as Olga pointed out, believes that they're in danger of any kind of imminent attack, particularly a nuclear attack. But these treaties serve the purpose of, one, building confidence on both sides. Second, in the Russian case, it reestablishes in Moscow's eyes that it is a serious partner for the U.S. and that Moscow is obsessed with its status in world politics, and nuclear weapons are the only way it can get the status that it craves. So the treaty indicates that Moscow is a serious player and therefore grants them that status. But third, also, as Olga pointed out, and as I've written, next year we're going to have a review conference for the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And Article 6 of that treaty calls upon the nuclear weapon states to reduce their nuclear weapons with a view towards an ultimate elimination of nuclear weapons. While ultimate elimination of nuclear weapons is not going to happen any time in the immediate future, this conference will go nowhere, as Olga pointed out, if the United States and Russia come to the conference, first of all, on opposite sides of the issues, and secondly, having shown the world that they can't reduce their nuclear weapons. So we will get no progress at all with regard to that particular agenda. Furthermore, from the point of view of the United States, it is important that nuclear weapons be less usable as military weapons because we're the strongest conventional power in the world, and nuclear capabilities on the part of other states deter us from using, from using our military capabilities if necessary. For example, if Iraq had had nuclear weapons in 1991, as it was trying to do, would we have been able to liberate Kuwait? It's a very different kind of situation would have resulted back then. Therefore, it's to our interest to reduce the importance that nuclear weapons play in world politics. Furthermore, and this is for the future, if you look at current research on nuclear weapons, particularly in Russia and China, there are serious research efforts underway to create nuclear weapons that can be used on the battlefield, that are small, low-yield fusion weapons. To the extent that we can prevent that from happening, we make it much more difficult for anybody in the future to use a nuclear weapon on the battlefield in the belief that this will give them victory or security.
I agree with much of the first part of what Stephen had said. I mean, I think that this treaty is important. It is important because it gets us back to the framework of arms control in a traditional sense, of countries sitting down, working this stuff out, doing it in a transparent way. Without the treaty, it is entirely possible, even likely, that both Russia and the United States will reduce their arsenals. But they'll do it in a way that they can't see each other doing it, which makes each country nervous, and the world can't see it, which makes the world nervous. What this does is it creates an accountability and transparency, not just in reductions, but in arsenals that you don't have otherwise. On the battlefield micronukes, I think the United States has been accused of programs like this too. And when it comes to, honestly, when it comes to Russian high-tech military programs, they are consistently very good in the development phase and very slow in the deployment phase. So, you know, my concerns about Russian battlefield nukes tend to go more in the, is there any plausible chance that the Russians will use something they have in their regular arsenal if their back is to the wall? You know, if you look not at the current national security strategy, but at the last national security concept, the basic statement was that Russia will use nuclear weapons potentially first if it feels that its sovereignty or territorial integrity are at risk. This isn't a crazed statement. It is fundamentally our unstated posture as well. We refuse to say we won't use them first. We are consistently ambiguous about nuclear use to counter chemical or biological use. So the Russians aren't saying anything that's that different from what the United States is saying. But, you know, when you think about actual nuclear use, this is where I get nervous. That said, START does open up the possibility of having conversations about the rest of the arsenal, about the tactical nuclear weapons arsenal. That's a tough line for both Russia and the United States to take. It's going to be a long time getting there. But without a strategic agreement framework, you're never, ever going to have those conversations at all. And that's a lot of weapons.
That's a good point. There's a huge imbalance in non-deployed strategic weapons and tactical nuclear weapons between what Russia has and America's dismantled most all of its. We have a question from the Internet from Ms. Paula Keyes. In this regards, Charles Krauthammer's op-ed piece in the Washington Post on July 10. Krauthammer says that a prospective START treaty between U.S. and Russia, quote, is useless at best, detrimental at worst, end quote, because it allows the Russians to exact a price linkage between offensive and defensive weapons. What are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I have great respect for Mr. Krauthammer, but I think he got it wrong here. As we've just pointed out, the treaty is not useless. So useless at best, I think we can take that off the table right away. Detrimental. The fact of the matter is the Russians are claiming, because there was language in the communiques and post-summit press conferences stating that the United States recognized the need to discuss the linkage between offense and defense. But the United States did not commit to anything. The missile defense program is still on track as far as the administration's public statements go. The review of them is going on as well. And as Olga pointed out, whether you support the idea of missile defense or not, when you look at the actual programs that have been tested, these particular missile defenses have a lot of questions surrounding them. Other missile defenses, such as the Israeli or Japanese system, have worked. So missile defense is possible in principle and in practice, but the ones that we've designed in Alaska and California, and which are supposed to go into Poland and the Czech Republic, have a lot of questions still surrounding them. So that's why the review is going on. As for creating this linkage, therefore, the linkage already existed in the Russians' minds, and nothing that was said at the summit would have changed their thinking, because it's very deeply rooted on this point. The language that came out of the summit allows for flexibility for both sides. So here I would take issue with Mr. Krauthammer's assessment.
I have absolutely nothing to add to that. I agree completely.